either was telling us the truth. Trust in news and the inherent goodness of the United States was bedrock. Now don't worry, this is not a political message. I'm not here to judge anyone. This is personal. My heart is broken not just because things are not the way they were back then, but because something precious about our democracy has been lost, and because I and millions of other patriotic Americans of all political persuasions are traumatized. We are suffering from disillusionment, disappointment, grief, and confusion. I am in need of healing. There's a story about a woman named Maria Oliver and her friend Chief John Joseph. People say it's a true story. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But regardless, it offers a profound teaching. Maria had spent a lifetime on the path of spiritual enlightenment. And along the way, she had met and become fast friends with a Lakota Sioux shaman named John Joseph. John was well educated and wise, a true healer and leader of his people. He was also a patriotic American who joined the Marines to serve in the Vietnam War. Maria was upset when John enlisted. She knew his reverence for all life and wondered how he was going to survive the brutality of war. Imagine her grief when she received the call that John had been killed. Maria grieved deeply, and not just for her personal loss, but because John, who loved peace so much, had died such a violent death, and because of the loss to the Sioux people of such a wise leader. About 3 months later, at precisely 1 a.m. in the morning, the phone rang and woke Maria from a deep sleep. The voice on the other end of the line was so familiar and beloved that she was instantly awake and alert. But John, she cried, they told me you had been killed. And then John told her a remarkable story. He recounted the horrible day when 2, maybe even 3 platoons of men had found themselves surrounded by Viet Cong in the jungle. It was a bloodbath, a horror scene. The man beside him was hit as they retreated, and John had instinctively picked him up and thrown him over his shoulder. But only minutes later, the world exploded, and John fell unconscious. Well, John Joseph was in a coma for nearly 2 months. Medical personnel told him that he had been medevaced in so badly wounded they had given him almost no chance for survival. You see, he had tripped a landmine and both his legs had been blown off. And because his dog tag was missing, until he awakened, no one knew who he was. But my physical survival, John told Maria, is not the most remarkable part of my story. The most remarkable part is what took place in my spirit after that landmine exploded. The eagle came for me, John said, and it lifted me up and flew off with me. I could look down and see all the smoke and the chaos below. For an instant, I could see my own inert, shattered body lying twisted on the ground. But soon the eagle carried me far away from all that. It soared over mountaintops and down out above the shining, sparkling water and dropped me in. The water felt soothing and comforting as I sank effortlessly into its depths. I had no will whatsoever to resist. I just wanted to drop to the bottom. No more pain, no more horror, no more struggle, just peace at last. But suddenly there was in front of me a giant dolphin. Gentle eyes looked into mine. Then the beautiful creature asked me one single question. John, what is your choice? Life or death? I hesitated, John said. I knew my body, mind, and spirit were shattered. What kind of life could I possibly have? And for a long moment, death seemed easier than life. But then John went on. From somewhere deep within me came a powerful desire to breathe air once more. I am not ready to go yet, he thought. I am not finished with life. No matter how difficult it may be, life is still beautiful, and the Great Spirit has purpose for me. And so I followed the dolphin's direct gaze and nodded slightly, and immediately she slid smoothly under me and began to carry me up and up and up toward the surface. The dream ended just as we broke the surface of the water, and I opened my eyes and found myself in a hospital bed. What does all that mean? Maria asked him. Well, John said, I spoke to my tribal elder and told him the story, and he said to me, John, you are a soulful man, a true lover of peace, but because of your patriotism, you agreed to place yourself in the fire of violence. But the brutality you encountered was so overwhelming that your soul retreated, curled up way deep inside where it felt protected. Your soul wounds were even more terrible than your physical ones. The elder went on. Eagle was Great Spirit, come to take you on a quest to retrieve your broken soul. Eagle knew that unless you could retrieve your life essence, there would be no point in your physical recovery. Though your body might heal, you would be a broken spirit and travel the world a half person. Dolphin was a messenger sent from Great Spirit to hear the longing of your soul. If you had surrendered to death, it would have honored your decision and left you there in the sea. But the moment you chose life, your healing began, and the messenger began to support you on the long ascent to wholeness. John Joseph went on to live an abundant life. He returned to the Sioux people and lived as a healer and holy man for over 30 years. He was an advocate for peace, education, and healthcare services every day of his life. Now, you and I may not have been brutally injured in a war, but people can be traumatized in many ways. In the insightful book, Trauma and Recovery, author Judith Harmon says that debilitating trauma is not only caused by a massive, terrible event or a horrible physical abuse. She says that loss of a dream or ongoing emotional deprivation or ongoing stress can result in symptoms like depression and numbness, sleeplessness, inability, irritability, and powerlessness. She calls this PTSD-like condition chronic soul trauma. The work, she says, is soul retrieval, and it begins with the decision to go on living. So I don't know if you're at all like me, but if you have felt yourself disconnected, maybe from yourself or your loved ones or your God, it could be that your soul is in retreat. If you seem less in touch with your intuitive powers, your soul may be in retreat. If you're experiencing chronic depression or fatigue, or are caught up in compulsive behaviors, your soul may be crying out for rescue. Now, a little while ago, hard to believe, but yeah, just a little while ago, it became eminently clear to me that circumstances in our country are not going to return to my ideal of normalcy anytime soon. And I realized that the healing I need must come from inside me and begin with the decision to go on living with things just the way they are. Clearly, I made that decision to carry on, because Dolphin came to me in the form of a friend who invited me to join her in an online program called Radical Compassion. Another friend offered me a 4-day trip to a serene mountain resort 4 days last week, I woke up to the sun rising over the mountains. Still came right back and felt the warmth returning to my soul. On day 1 of the Compassion Program, facilitator Tara Brock talked about the tendency of spiritual people to judge themselves harshly for having so-called negative feelings. And she talked about how painful it is to turn against ourselves in this way. She said, and I deeply hurt her, that self-blame is, she said, it's one of the biggest challenges there is to our happiness and well-being. For some, it's a nagging sense of falling short, a critical, perfectionistic tape in the mind that is constantly seeking out our faults or telling us that we're not enough. She calls this the trance of unworthiness and says that healing requires devotion to a path of compassion. She quoted the great Buddhist teacher Thich Nhat Hanh and said, "Your path is not to seek self-love, but merely to seek and find all the barriers within yourself that you have built against it." Self-criticism does not cause growth. It digs the groove of unworthiness deeper. Only when we find compassion for ourselves are we free to change. Mara, the shadow, always lurked around the edges of gatherings where the Buddha was speaking. Ananda, the Buddha's beloved protector, would become distressed by this and would run to the Buddha and cry, "Oh, what terrible misfortune! Mara is here." But the Buddha was not disturbed. He went right up to Mara and said, "I see you there. Come, let's have tea." It seems that being present with the shadow and offering it kindness and care will make a friend of it. Poet Dana Falls writes, "Do you value your reasons for staying small more than the light shining through the open door? Forgive yourself. Now is the only time you have to be whole. Now is the sole moment that exists for you to live in the radiance of your true nature. Perfection is not a prerequisite for anything but pain. Please, oh please, don't continue to believe in your stories of separation and failure. This is the day of your awakening." On day 4, Tara interviewed Elizabeth Gilbert. You may know her. She's the author of Eat, Pray, Love. And she asked her how she got in touch with tenderness for herself. And Gilbert recounted how after a painful romantic breakup, she flew off to Italy to try to find herself. One morning, she woke up feeling so depressed and lonely that she feared she might fall back into her old drug abuse habit. Her soul must have cried out from this dark place because a presence emerged from deep inside of her. And here is what it said. "I'll love you and I'll be here for you no matter what. If you need the medication again, go ahead and take it and I'll love you through it. If you don't need to take the medication, I'll love you too. There is nothing you can ever do to lose my love. I am stronger than depression and braver than loneliness, and nothing will ever exhaust me. I am here and I love you." Gilbert continued, "Now I turn to this presence every day. It is the foremost practice of my life, the most important relationship in my life. Without it, I'm a meat puppet, a thought monster. I'm in a lot of trouble. But with it, I can get through almost anything. Every morning, she says, I write a letter to this presence, which I now call love, and the first thing I say is, I need you, please help. Then I pour out my problems and my feelings in a raw and honest way, and presence always responds the same way. It says, I don't need anything from you. I don't need you to get better. I don't need you to change or feel better or evolve. I'll stay with you if you're living in a box. I was there at the beginning and I'll be there at the end. I will never leave you. And she asked, isn't that what we all want to hear? She said, for me, it works every time. I'm comforted and strengthened. I don't know why or how it works, she said. I don't care. It just does. And it's like my own yearning seems to call it forth, this light-filled presence that loves me just as I am and will never leave me. And you know what else I found, she said? The more I reach for it, the more accessible it is. Do you know the presence that Gilbert describes? It is not forgiveness. There is no need for forgiveness, since the presence never judged to begin with. It is the Great Spirit, far beyond human consciousness, and yet we human beings can practice being like it. We've all been hurt by other people, and we've all hurt someone. We've been asked for forgiveness, and we've asked for it from another. But you know, there is something beyond forgiveness, and that something is mercy. Forgiveness is something that is a good and generous person gives to someone, a humble one who has messed up in some way. There is an imbalance between the forgiver and the forgiven. But mercy arises out of a compassion that says, I'm going to sit with you in the shared dilemma of how utterly impossible it is to be a human being. Mercy flows from one battered soul to another. It's not about being bigger than another. It's about being the same as another. With a truly merciful person, have you noticed we're always relaxed? We know we won't be thrown away, no matter what. And we know we're not judged. Well, our souls need mercy to heal. And nurturing and a quiet place where the mind chatter can slow down so we can reconnect with the core of who we are. Desmond Tutu, Anglican Archbishop of South Africa, a man no stranger to violence and trauma, wrote, human beings are actually created for the transcendent, the sublime, for the beautiful and the truthful. Yes. And our souls also need protection from the terrible feeling of impotent rage that was underneath my sadness. Desmond Tutu was not passive. There is a basic rule of life that is agreed upon by every ethical, religious, and spiritual tradition in the world. And it says, those of us who are warm and dry and well-fed and safe must show up for those who are cold and wet and hungry and endangered. As self-compassion heals our souls, we find ourselves energetic and brave enough to step into action. Self-compassion naturally spills over onto other people. Yet, if we dwell on how much suffering there is in the world, we could easily get overwhelmed again. So Elizabeth Gilbert advises us to take action in the arena that tugs at our hearts. She says to choose the action that is both effective and personally fulfilling. She talks about how on her journey she discovered that wherever there is a catastrophe, there are incredibly good people on the front lines helping. Individually, we may not be able to make that much of a difference, but we can support people who are organized and effective on the ground. So I'm taking my cue from her, and I'll offer it to you. I've decided to help the helpers the best I can, and let that be enough. A rabbi was passing the cobbler shop late one evening, and seeing a light in the window, he stops and finds the cobbler still hard at work, repairing a laborer's boot by candlelight. "Why do you work so late?" he asks. And the cobbler responds, "As long as there is light, it is possible to mend." Finally, a word from David Wagoner. Stand still. The trees ahead and the bushes near you are not lost. The forest breathes. Listen. It speaks. I have made this place for you. Stand still. The forest knows where you are. Let it find you. God bless you, everyone. I invite you now to take a nice, long, deep breath. And as you do, focus your attention on your heart. Imagine that you are breathing in and out from your heart. Just sitting and breathing. Reflect, is there something I am holding against myself? What feelings do these thoughts bring up? And then ask, what is wrong with letting all this blame go? What am I afraid of? And then allow it all to be there, everything that comes up. The thought, the feeling. Fear. I see you, Mara. Come, let's have tea. Can you sit with that shadowy inner critic and have a quiet conversation? Perhaps you will become friends. Notice how self-criticism and perfectionism feel. Notice where that sense of not enough resides in the body. In your throat, in the belly, in the facial muscles. And ask, what does this hurting place need from me? What words might help? What energy? So I invite you now, if you care to place your hand on your heart or your belly and silently call out to your higher self. Help. I need you. And let it send a loving message inward. Any expression of kindness. Offer tenderness through your touch. And notice how your facial muscles relax. What is it like to take in such compassionate love energy? So we rest now in the feeling of being completely and utterly loved. We rest in simple beingness. When we pray, Divine Presence, breathe through me. Show me your essence. Breathe into me a vision of who I would be if I did not think something was wrong with me. In the silence. Thank you, Great Spirit, for healing. Thank you for inner peace. Thank you for truth. Thank you for guidance. I leave this place today knowing that the presence of love is always present and active within me, and I am deeply grateful. And so it is.